The small town of Greenfield was quiet and calm. People knew each other, and life moved slowly there. But on the top of the hill stood a house that nobody liked to talk about. It was old, big, and always looked dark, even on sunny days. Children in the town would point at it and run away laughing nervously. The house had tall windows covered with dust and broken shutters. Its roof was missing tiles, and the paint was peeling off the walls. Some people said it was empty for 50 years. Others said someone still lived inside but never came out. No one really knew the truth, and nobody wanted to find out. At the bottom of the hill lived a boy named Jack. He was 12 years old and loved adventures. Jack had heard many stories about the house on the hill. His friends told him that ghosts lived there. Some even said they saw lights in the windows at night. Jack never believed those stories, but he was curious. One summer morning, Jack sat on his porch looking at the hill. The house stood there like a giant shadow. The wind blew, and the trees around it moved like they were whispering secrets. Jack thought about all the times he had wondered what was inside that house. That day, he made a plan to find out. He waited until the afternoon when the sun was bright. Jack packed a small bag with a flashlight, a notebook, and a bottle of water. He wanted to write about what he found. He put on his cap and told his mother he was going to play with his friends. Then he started walking toward the hill, feeling excited and a little scared. As Jack walked up the hill, the air grew cooler. The sound of birds became quiet, and the only sound was his footsteps on the dry path. He looked back at the town, which now seemed far away. The house looked bigger and darker as he got closer. His heart beat faster, but he kept walking. When he reached the top, Jack stood in front of the big wooden gate. The gate was rusty, and the paint had turned brown. He pushed it, and it made a loud creaking sound. Jack froze for a moment, waiting to hear if anyone was coming. But there was only silence. He stepped inside the yard, and the gate closed behind him with a heavy thud. The garden was wild and full of weeds. Old trees stood like guards around the house. Jack saw a broken swing hanging from a tree, moving slowly in the wind. It looked like someone had left it many years ago. He walked to the front door, which was tall and had strange marks on it. Jack touched the door, and it felt cold under his fingers. Jack turned the old door handle, but it didn't move. The door was locked tight. He stepped back and looked around. There was a broken window on the side of the house. The glass was cracked, and some pieces were missing. Jack decided to go there. He walked slowly, feeling like the house was watching him. The side of the house was even scarier. The walls had black stains, and green moss grew in the corners. Jack pushed some bushes away and reached the broken window. He looked inside. It was dark, and he could only see old furniture covered with white sheets. Dust danced in the sunlight coming from the broken glass. Jack climbed inside carefully. His shoes landed on a wooden floor that made a soft creak. The air smelled of old books and something strange, like wet clothes left for too long. Jack pulled out his flashlight and turned it on. The light cut through the darkness and showed more furniture, some broken chairs, and a big mirror covered with dirt. Jack opened a door that led to the hallway. The hallway was long and dark, with pictures hanging on the walls. He walked closer to one picture and wiped the dust with his hand. It showed a family, a man, a woman, and a little girl. They were dressed in old clothes. Their faces looked serious, almost sad. Jack stared at the picture for a moment, feeling like their eyes were following him. He heard a soft sound behind him. Jack turned quickly, his heart beating fast. But there was nothing, only the empty room he had left. He laughed nervously and said, "I'm just hearing things." He took a deep breath and kept moving down the hallway. The floor creaked under his steps like it didn't like him being there. At the end of the hallway, Jack saw stairs going up. The steps were covered with dust and spider webs. He pointed the flashlight up and saw a shadow move quickly. Jack froze. What was that? He whispered. He waited for a sound, but there was only silence again. He wanted to run, but his curiosity was stronger. Slowly, he climbed the stairs. Each step made a loud creak, and Jack felt like the sound could wake the whole house. When he reached the top, he saw 3 doors. One was half open, and the other 2 were closed. Jack walked to the open one first. He pushed it wider and stepped inside. It was a bedroom with a big bed, an old wardrobe, and a window looking over the hill. The bed was covered with dust. And the blanket was torn. Jack touched the wardrobe, and its door opened with a squeak. Inside were old clothes hanging, gray with dust. A shoe lay on the floor, small like it belonged to a child. Jack picked it up and felt strange, like someone was watching him. He quickly put it back and stepped away. Suddenly, the bedroom door slammed shut behind him. Jack jumped and ran to it. He pulled the handle, but it didn't move. His heart raced, and he banged on the door. "Who's there?" he shouted. There was no answer, only silence. Then, from the corner of the room, he heard a soft whisper. It sounded like a little girl laughing. Jack turned toward the sound, his hands shaking. The corner was dark, and his flashlight flickered for a moment. He hit it, and the light came back. There was nothing in the corner, only a broken chair and an old doll lying on the floor. The doll's eyes were open, and its smile looked strange. Jack slowly walked to the door and pulled again. This time, it opened. He ran out into the hallway, breathing fast. It's just the wind, he told himself, though he didn't believe it. He looked at the other 2 doors. Something inside him wanted to leave the house, but another part wanted to know what was behind those doors. Jack walked to the second door and opened it slowly. This room was full of books. Shelves stood on every wall, but most books were on the floor. Jack stepped inside and picked up one book. Its cover was black, and the pages were yellow. He opened it and saw strange handwriting. The letters were big and looked old. Some words were underlined, and there were drawings of symbols he didn't understand. Jack heard the sound again, a soft laugh. Like before. This time, it was closer. He turned around, but the room was empty. His hands felt cold, and he dropped the book. It hit the floor with a loud thud, and for a moment, the whole house seemed to shake. Jack ran out of the room, not looking back. He stood in the hallway, breathing hard. The last door was in front of him, slightly open. Jack didn't want to go in, but something pulled him forward. He pushed the door and saw a small room with a rocking chair in the middle. The chair was moving slowly, back and forth, as if someone had just left it. Jack felt his knees go weak. He stepped closer, shining the flashlight on the chair. On it lay a piece of paper. Jack picked it up with shaking hands. The paper had only 3 words written in big letters: "Leave this house." Jack dropped it and ran out of the room. He ran down the stairs, past the hallway, and toward the window he came from. He climbed out and jumped to the ground. Outside, the wind blew hard, and the trees made strange sounds. Jack ran to the gate, pushed it open, and didn't stop until he was back at the bottom of the hill. His heart was beating so fast he thought it would burst. When he looked back, the house stood still and silent, like nothing had happened. But Jack knew something was wrong with that house. Jack sat on the steps of his house, still breathing hard. His mother called from inside, asking where he had been. Jack wiped his face and said, "Just playing outside." He didn't want to tell her the truth. No one would believe him. But deep inside, Jack knew he had seen something strange in that house. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the paper with the words, "Leave this house." Who wrote it? Why was the chair moving? And who was laughing? The more Jack tried to forget, the more questions filled his head. He tossed and turned, and the sound of the whispering laugh kept coming back in his mind. The next morning, Jack sat at the breakfast table, quiet and pale. His mother noticed and asked, "Are you feeling sick?" Jack shook his head. He wanted to tell her everything but stopped himself. She would never allow him to go outside again if she knew. After breakfast, Jack went to his room and opened his notebook. He wrote, "The house on the hill is not empty." He thought about the pictures on the wall, the family in the photo, and the old doll. Who were they? Where did they go? And why was the book full of strange symbols? Jack's curiosity was stronger than his fear. He told himself he would never go back to that house. But by the afternoon, he changed his mind. He had to know the truth. Jack packed his bag again, this time with more things, a bigger flashlight, some snacks, and a small camera. He wanted proof. If someone laughed in the house, he would record it. He left his home quietly and started walking up the hill again. The sun was bright, but the house still looked dark and lonely. When Jack reached the gate, he felt the same cold wind on his face. He pushed the gate open, and it made the same loud creak. This time, Jack whispered, "I'm not afraid." He walked across the yard, past the broken swing, and went straight to the window where he had entered before. He climbed in and landed on the wooden floor. The air inside was even colder than before. Jack turned on his flashlight and looked around. Everything was in the same place, the fireplace, the big mirror, the dusty chairs. But something was different. The doll from the bedroom was now sitting on the table in the first room. Jack froze. He was sure it had been upstairs before. He walked closer to the doll. Its glass eyes stared at him, and its smile looked wider than before. Jack whispered, "Who moved you?" Of course, there was no answer. He turned away quickly and walked to the hallway. The pictures were still there, but the family photo looked strange. The little girl's face seemed blurred, like it had changed. Jack climbed the stairs again. His heart was beating fast, but he kept moving. He went to the first bedroom. The wardrobe was still open, and the small shoe was still on the floor. Jack picked up the shoe and noticed something new, a name written inside. It said, "Lily." Jack whispered the name softly and felt a chill on his neck. He put the shoe back and moved to the second room, the library. The books were still on the floor. Jack picked up the black book again and opened it. This time, the handwriting looked darker, like someone had written it recently. One sentence was underlined twice. Jack read it slowly, "She must never leave." Jack's hands trembled. Who was she? Was it Lily? He heard the laugh again, louder this time, coming from the last room, the one with the rocking chair. Jack didn't want to go there, but his feet started moving on their own. He opened the door slowly. The rocking chair was still moving, faster than before. And on the chair sat the doll again. Jack stepped back, his heart racing. How did you get here?" he whispered. The doll stared at him, its glass eyes shining in the dim light. Jack turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind him. He pulled the handle, but it didn't move. Then he heard footsteps, soft, like someone small was walking across the floor. He turned slowly. In the corner of the room stood a little girl. She wore a white dress that looked old and dirty. Her hair covered her face, and her hands held a small teddy bear. Jack froze, unable to breathe. The girl lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were empty, black like deep holes, and her lips curved into a strange smile. Jack tried to speak, but no sound came out. The girl whispered, "Why did you come back?" Her voice was soft but cold. Like ice. Jack shook his head and said, I just wanted to see." The girl tilted her head and said, "You saw enough the first time." She took one step forward, and the floor creaked under her feet. Jack backed away until his back hit the wall. The girl held out her teddy bear and said, "Do you want to play with me?" Jack shook his head fast. "No. I just want to leave." The girl smiled wider, and her black eyes stared into his soul. "You can't leave now," she whispered. "You're my friend." Suddenly, the rocking chair stopped moving, and the lights flickered. Jack heard a loud sound behind him, and the door opened by itself. Without thinking, he ran. He ran down the stairs, through the hallway, and out the broken window. He jumped to the ground and ran out of the yard without looking back. His legs hurt, but he didn't stop until he was far from the house. When Jack reached the bottom of the hill, he collapsed on the grass, breathing hard. He looked up at the house. The windows were dark, but he thought he saw a small figure standing at one of them, watching him. Jack whispered to himself, "I'm never going back there." But deep inside, he knew it wasn't over. The house wouldn't let him go that easily. Jack didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the little girl's face. Her black eyes, her cold voice, her words, "You can't leave now." He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the clock ticking in his room. But sometimes, he thought he heard something else, soft footsteps near his door. When morning came, Jack felt tired and weak. His mother asked again, "Jack, what's wrong with you?" He shook his head and said, "I'm just tired." He didn't tell her about Lily or the moving doll. How could he explain? She would never believe him. But deep inside, Jack knew he couldn't stay quiet forever. At school, Jack couldn't focus. His friends laughed and played. But Jack stayed silent. His best friend, Ben, noticed and asked, "What happened to you?" Jack hesitated, then whispered, "Do you remember the house on the hill?" Ben nodded. "Yeah, the haunted one." "Why?" Jack leaned closer and said, "It's not just a story. I went inside." Ben's eyes went wide. "No way. What did you see?" Jack swallowed hard. "A girl. Her name is Lily. She's not alive." Ben laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right?" Jack shook his head. "I'm not. She spoke to me. She said I can't leave." Ben stared at him, not sure if it was a joke or the truth. "You're crazy," he said. But Jack could see fear in his friend's eyes. After school, Jack went straight home. He couldn't stop thinking about the words in the black book, "She must never leave." Who wrote that? Why was Lily trapped in the house? Jack felt something strange. He wasn't just scared anymore. He felt sorry for her. She looked lonely. Maybe that's why she wanted him to stay. That night, Jack opened his notebook and started writing everything he remembered: the doll, the chair, the paper, the black book, Lily's voice. Then he drew the symbols from the book as best as he could. They looked strange, like circles with lines through them. Jack stared at the page, wondering what they meant. He decided to search online for old stories about the house. He typed "Greenfield Hill House History" into the computer. After some time, he found a very old article. The headline read, "Family Disappears in Hill House, Mystery Unsolved." Jack clicked on it and read the story carefully. The article said that 50 years ago, a family lived in the house: the father, the mother, and their little daughter, Lily. One stormy night, all three vanished without a trace. People searched everywhere but never found them. Some said the family moved away secretly. Others believed something terrible happened inside that house. Jack's hands shook as he read. The article had an old photo, the same one Jack saw in the hallway. The serious faces, the little girl standing between her parents. Jack whispered, "It's true, she's real." He printed the article and hid it in his notebook. He knew now that Lily was a ghost, but why was she still there? What happened to her family? Jack had to know. The next day, Jack told himself he wouldn't go back. But by afternoon, he was walking toward the hill again. He couldn't stop. Something inside him was pulling him to the house, like an invisible string tied to his heart. The house stood waiting, dark and silent, as if it knew he was coming. Jack entered through the same window. This time, the air felt heavier, like it was full of whispers. He turned on his flashlight and saw something new, the words "Welcome back" written in dust on the floor. Jack's heart jumped. Someone, or something, had written that for him. He walked to the library, where the black book lay open on the table. He didn't remember leaving it open. The page showed new writing that wasn't there before. It said, "You belong here." Jack stepped back, breathing fast. Then he heard Lily's voice again, soft and sweet, "I knew you would come back." Jack turned slowly. Lily was standing in the doorway, holding her teddy bear. Her white dress floated lightly, and her hair covered half her face. Jack swallowed hard. "Lily. What do you want from me?" She tilted her head. "I just want to play. Will you play with me?" Jack shook his head. "I can't stay here." Lily's smile faded. "But you promised." Jack frowned. "No, I didn't." Lily's voice turned cold. "You came back. That means you chose me." Jack felt his legs shaking. "Why are you here, Lily? What happened to you?" For a moment, Lily was quiet. Then she whispered, "He wouldn't let us leave." Jack's heart pounded. Who? Who wouldn't let you leave?" Lily lifted her head slowly, and for the first time, Jack saw tears in her black eyes. "Daddy," she said softly. "Daddy kept us here. And now you will stay too." Jack felt his blood run cold. The shadows in the room seemed to grow darker. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Jack turned, shining his flashlight at the door. A deep voice rumbled through the house, "Who is in my house?" Jack froze. The voice was angry, and it made the walls shake. Lily smiled strangely and whispered, "Daddy's home." The door slammed shut, and the flashlight flickered again. Jack backed away, looking for another way out. He ran to the window, but it was now covered with wooden boards that weren't there before. He pulled hard, but the boards didn't move. The voice came closer, louder, "You shouldn't be here, boy." Jack turned to Lily. "Please, let me go." She just hugged her teddy bear and said, "You can't. Daddy doesn't like visitors." The room grew colder, and Jack could see his breath in the air. He heard the footsteps stop right outside the door. The handle turned slowly. Jack's heart almost stopped beating. The door opened, but there was no one there. Only darkness filled the hallway. Then, from the shadows, two glowing eyes appeared, huge and red, burning like fire. Jack stumbled back, screaming. A tall figure stepped into the room, its face hidden in darkness. The voice growled, "You belong to me now." Jack ran to the other side of the room, but the figure moved fast, like a shadow flying through the air. It reached for Jack with long, black hands. Jack ducked and ran out of the room, down the hallway, his feet pounding the floor. He didn't look back, but he heard the deep voice roaring, "Come back." Jack found the stairs and ran down, almost falling. The house shook like it was alive. Pictures fell from the walls, and the floor cracked under his feet. Jack reached the window he came from, but it was gone. The wall was solid now, as if the window never existed. Jack screamed and ran to the front door, but it was locked tight. He banged on the door, shouting, "Let me out." Behind him, the deep voice laughed, loud and terrible. "You can't leave, boy. You're part of the family now." Jack turned and saw Lily standing at the bottom of the stairs. She smiled sweetly and said, "Don't be scared. Daddy takes care of us." Jack shook his head, tears in his eyes. "No. I'm not staying here." He ran to another hallway, hoping for a back door. The hall was long and dark, with more pictures on the walls. All the faces in the pictures now had black eyes, just like Lily. Jack felt like the whole house was watching him. He reached the end of the hallway and saw a small door. He pulled it open and found a staircase going down. The basement. Jack hesitated, but the sound of heavy footsteps came from behind him. He had no choice. He ran down the stairs into the darkness below. The basement smelled of dirt and old wood. Jack's flashlight shook in his hand as he stepped down the stairs. The air was damp and cold, and his breath came out in white clouds. Behind him, the door slammed shut, and everything went silent. The only sound was his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He reached the bottom and shone the light around. The basement was huge, filled with old furniture, broken boxes, and rusty tools. Spider webs hung from the ceiling, and water dripped from somewhere in the dark. Jack moved slowly, looking for another door, any way out of this nightmare. Then he saw something strange in the corner, a large wooden chest. It was covered with dust and locked with a heavy chain. Jack felt drawn to it. He walked closer and wiped the dust away. On the lid were carved letters, Lily. Jack froze. His hands trembled as he touched the cold wood. Suddenly, Lily's voice whispered behind him, soft and sweet, "That's my box." Jack spun around, but no one was there. He turned back to the chest, his heart racing. Why did Lily have a chest down here? He pulled on the chain, but it didn't move. Then he noticed something else, a small skeleton key lying on a table nearby. Jack grabbed the key and unlocked the chain. It fell to the floor with a loud clang that echoed in the basement. He slowly opened the chest, and the smell of rot filled the air. Inside were old toys, a torn teddy bear, and bones. Tiny bones of a child. Jack gasped and stumbled back, dropping the flashlight for a second. He picked up the light with shaking hands and looked again. The bones were real. Jack whispered, "Oh no." Lily, his stomach turned. Lily was dead, and her body had been hidden here for 50 years. Suddenly, the basement shook, and the deep voice roared, "What are you doing?" Jack turned and saw the shadowy figure at the bottom of the stairs. Its eyes glowed red, and its shape was huge and twisted. Jack backed away, his flashlight flickering. The voice thundered, "You took her from me." The ground cracked, and dust fell from the ceiling. Jack ran behind some boxes, breathing hard. Lily's voice filled the room, but now it sounded angry. "Why did you open it?" "That was our secret." Jack shouted, "I just wanted to help you." But the voices only grew louder. The father's roar shook the walls, "You can never help her. She's mine forever." Jack realized the truth. Lily wasn't just trapped, her father's spirit had locked her soul in this house. And now he wanted to keep Jack too. Jack had to find a way to escape before the ghost killed him. He looked around and saw an old door on the other side of the basement. It might lead outside. He ran for the door, but the shadow moved like smoke and blocked his way. The red eyes glared down at him. The ghost's long arms reached out, black and sharp like claws. Jack ducked and rolled to the side, grabbing a rusty metal rod from the floor. He held it tight, though he knew it wouldn't help much. The ghost roared again, and the basement lights exploded, leaving only darkness. Jack swung the flashlight around wildly. Then he saw something strange, the black book lying on a wooden shelf. It was glowing faintly, like it had power. Jack remembered the symbols inside. Maybe they could stop the ghost. He ran to the shelf, grabbed the book, and opened it. The pages turned by themselves, stopping at a page covered in strange circles and lines. Under the symbols were words: say the name. Break the chain. Jack read it again and shouted, say the name. What name? Lily appeared in front of him, her black eyes shining. She whispered, don't do it. Her voice was cold and full of anger. We can be friends, Jack. Forever. Jack shook his head. No. I'm leaving. He looked at the book and then at Lily. He took a deep breath and shouted her full name, Lily Harper. The basement shook violently. Lily screamed, a high, piercing sound that made Jack's ears ring. The shadow roared in rage, no. The red eyes blazed brighter, and the floor cracked open. Jack shouted her name again and again, Lily Harper. Lily Harper. The chains around the chest broke with a loud snap. A bright light shot out, filling the basement. Lily's ghost screamed one last time before her body turned into white smoke and disappeared into the light. The shadow of the father howled, his huge form twisting and breaking apart. You can't take her from me, he roared before vanishing into the darkness. Jack fell to the ground, breathing hard. The house stopped shaking, and the silence was heavy. The light faded slowly, leaving only Jack and the broken chest. He looked around. The basement was empty now. No ghost, no Lily, no red eyes. Only dust and shadows. Jack stood up, shaking all over. He ran to the small door at the far end of the basement and pushed it. It opened with a loud creak, and cool night air rushed in. Jack stumbled outside and fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The house loomed behind him, dark and silent once more. Jack looked up at the sky. The moon was bright, and the stars shone like tiny candles. He whispered, it's over. But deep down, he wasn't sure. He turned to look at the house one last time. For a moment, he thought he saw a small figure in the upstairs window, Lily, watching him, her face calm and sad. Then the window went dark. Jack walked down the hill slowly, his legs weak and his mind heavy. He knew he would never forget what happened. He had freed Lily, but the memory of her black eyes and the sound of her voice would haunt him forever. Jack walked down the hill slowly, the night air cold on his skin. His legs felt heavy, and every step seemed harder than the last. When he finally reached the bottom, he stopped and looked back. The house stood dark and still, like a sleeping monster. Jack whispered to himself, it's over. It has to be. He walked home, trying to calm his racing heart. When he reached his street, everything looked normal, the lights in the houses, the smell of dinner in the air, the sound of a dog barking somewhere. But Jack didn't feel normal. He felt like a part of him was still up there in that house. His mother opened the door and frowned. Jack! Where have you been? It's late. Jack mumbled, just, out with friends. She shook her head. You look pale. Go wash up and eat something. Jack nodded and walked to his room, his mind heavy with everything that happened. He sat on his bed and stared at the black book in his hands. Yes, he had taken it from the basement before running out. He didn't know why. Maybe he wanted proof. Maybe he just couldn't leave it there. The cover was cold, and the pages were full of strange symbols. Jack wondered what other secrets it held. That night, Jack tried to sleep, but he couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Lily's voice, don't do it. We can be friends, Jack. Forever. He sat up in bed, sweating. The room was quiet, but something felt wrong. Then he heard it, a soft sound, like a whisper. Jack froze and listened. The whisper came again, this time clearer. Jack, his heart jumped. He turned on the lamp, but the room was empty. He checked under the bed, in the closet, nothing. When he sat back down, he noticed something strange. The black book was open on his desk. He didn't remember opening it. The page showed new writing, in dark ink, "Thank you for setting me free." Jack stared at the words, his hands shaking. He whispered, "Lily." Then another line appeared slowly, like someone invisible was writing it, "Now we can always be together." Jack dropped the book and stepped back, his heart pounding. The light flickered, and the room grew colder. Jack saw his breath in the air. He whispered, "No, no, it's over." Then, in the corner of the room, the shadows began to move. A small figure stepped out, a little girl in a white dress. Her hair fell over her face, and she held a teddy bear. Jack backed up until he hit the wall. "No, you're gone. I freed you." Lily lifted her head slowly. Her eyes weren't black anymore, they were pale gray, but they still didn't look human. She smiled softly and said, "You did free me, from the house. But now I need a new home." Jack shook his head, his voice shaking. "No, you can't stay here." Lily tilted her head, her smile growing wider. "You promised we'd be friends forever." Jack shouted, "I never promised." Lily's voice turned cold. "You said it when you came back. You chose me." The door slammed shut by itself, and the windows rattled. Jack grabbed the black book and shouted, "Leave me alone." But the pages turned quickly, stopping at a page with big letters, "Once bound, never apart." Jack's hands trembled. He threw the book across the room, but it slid back to his feet like magic. Lily stepped closer, her feet making no sound. "Don't be scared, Jack. We'll have fun." The lamp flickered and went out, leaving the room in darkness. The only light came from Lily's pale gray eyes. Jack pressed himself against the wall, tears in his eyes. "Please, please go." Lily stopped in front of him and whispered in his ear, "Forever, Jack. Forever." Then everything went black. When Jack opened his eyes, it was morning. Sunlight filled the room. He sat up quickly, looking around. The black book was gone. The floor was clean, and there was no sign of Lily. Jack wondered if it had all been a dream. He touched his desk, his bed, the walls, everything was normal. He went downstairs, and his mother smiled. "Morning, Jack. You slept well." Jack nodded slowly, trying to believe it was over. He sat at the table and started eating breakfast. But then he noticed something. On the plate, written in syrup, were 3 words, "See you tonight." Jack's hand shook, and the fork fell from his fingers. He stared at the words, his heart pounding harder than ever. He whispered her name softly, almost afraid to say it out loud, "Lily." Outside, on the hill, the old house stood silent and empty. But if you looked closely, you could see a shadow in the upstairs window, a small figure in a white dress, smiling. And somewhere, faint and cold, came the sound of a little girl's laughter.